Well, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like it is a little after 2, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to Farm Succession Planning. This is our first event of the Next Generation Summit. This summit was created 2 years ago as an opportunity to bring together and support landowners and beginning farmers. Land access can be one of the greatest challenges on both sides, and so bringing the two audiences together was really important to our membership. And so we've created this summit, and this year we are bringing it virtual. So welcome. I'm sure we have many new faces from further away than we've had before. So I'm excited to meet some new people today. So today we have Diane Tourney with us. She is coming from Seattle area. So she is running on Pacific Coast time, and so we're catching a couple different time zones already. So I'm excited to have Diane present. She's going to go through some business succession planning and then move into some family dynamic conversation. So there's going to be a lot for us over the next 2 hours. I will be, so I am Greg Padgett. I'm the Next Generation Director here at Practical Farmers of Iowa, and I'm going to be navigating the chat box with my colleague Celeste Christie, who is our Next Generation Coordinator. Together we'll navigate that chat box to make sure your questions are answered. I know Diana will open it up for some different questions as well, and so we might have the opportunity to do some unmuting, and hopefully we'll have some opportunity to connect with each other as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Diana, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this poll open for a few more seconds while she starts her introduction, and then we'll close that out and share the results.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to make sure folks can hear me okay. If not, if it's going okay, yes? All right.
I can hear you.
Good. All right. Well, I'm pleased to join you today, and I work with dozens of farmers every month on farm and ranch transitions. My background is I'm an accountant. However, I grew up on a farm where we raised draft horses and cows, as well as a lot of row crops and chickens. And so, and then my husband and I have a farm and a ranch, and then we have another family farm that I'm going to be owning pretty soon in Colorado. So anyway, I am you, and I live exactly what I'm asking you to do. The reason that I began working in farm succession planning is I began seeing many of my clients in the community where I was at. They didn't have a plan, and those that didn't, things did not go as I know they would have appreciated. So my goal has been to work with people, and so I developed a program at Clackamas Community College, and I look forward to sharing it with you. And I think that we have some excellent results here. I find that we have people, according to the poll, pretty much across the gamut, starting and you've already finished it, but you're just checking it out. So welcome, and I'm so glad that you're here. All right, business succession planning. And I'd like to start out by saying, just because you make a business plan, lightning has not struck any of my students, and they're still alive. So should you finish your succession plan, I want folks to know, and I literally had one person, when he completed his, he started crying, and that's very much what he thought would happen. And so I have not had that happen, and I hope I never do. And I have worked with probably close to 400 farmers in the last few years. So I think you're going to be okay, and I'd like the choice to be yours. So what is business succession planning? First of all, the key thing you have to remember is you have a business, and it's called a farm. In fact, many farms are multiple businesses, not just one. And so you have to understand both sides of the equation when you look at a farm transition, both you as the current owner or owners, and then who is going to be the buyer or the one to assume it if it's an heir. So it helps each side to look at how the other is coming to the table and understand their concerns as you move through things. It helps us both. I urge people to start with the end in mind. And I learned early on that what is success to you? And it varies markedly between different people. And so it's important to really put great detail into that. Sometimes I even call this your dare to dream. What is it that would make you feel like this went exactly the best as you could have hoped? There are no boundaries. Paper is cheap, and so write it out. And if there are multiple owners on the property, I recommend that you each take time to do this and do it separately. I would share one little example, and I'm sure none of you will experience this in my class today, but I had one gentleman who was quite overbearing with his spouse, and he literally told her, oh, no, that isn't an important thing. This is important. And sadly enough, after we got through things and they sold the property, she told him, I'm in the driver's seat. They were married for 64 years. And he had pretty much, been the one to man the ship up until then. And she wasn't allowed to participate. So we are teams. We are co-owners. And so my goal is that your family relationships maintain even after a transition. So please be respectful of the other folks and think about their side a little bit too. Be a little flexible. This is going to take into your values. You need to decide, do you have a legacy? Is it really important to you? How do you feel about the community that you live in? Your children. We'll soon get to issues like fair versus equal, and fair is not equal in most cases. What do you really need? Sometimes your 401k is your farm or ranch. Maybe you don't want to move away from it. How can you stay there and still make it a successful enterprise so someone can come in and either operate it as a manager or perhaps your future heir? Who is going to be part of your core succession planning team? And it really is a team. If they're not on board now, what are the skills that you need? I can tell you at the very least, you're going to need some various professionals. You're going to need an accountant, an attorney, unless you happen to be one of those roles. And I urge people not to be their own accountant or own attorney. This is a time where you need someone who is objective. And you probably want to talk to a realtor, even if your intent is not to sell. And understand the appraisal process, not necessarily go out and get an appraisal. Your banker might also be another one, and anyone that you own notes to, that might be another part of your team. And there might just be someone there that is a counselor to kind of help you work through all the issues. So sit down and think who might be part of your team, and it may not be people you've worked with before. Just because you have that really nice tax preparer that's done your taxes for the last 20 years and you know them really well, do they really understand ag? And if you don't, this is the time when you need someone who is a specialist in the ag business. It'll serve you well and it'll avoid a lot of pain as you go down the road. Who is this succession plan going to include? Just because you want to include them, at some point, either family meetings or key employee meetings need to take place. And so those need to be involved. And you need a timeline. When is this going to happen? And in our question that we'll share here in a few minutes, it's kind of interesting to see how the class is kind of dispersed over the continuum of starting versus you pretty much completed it. Developing a timeline, consider you get things done. If you will sit down and develop a timeline, it's okay to move things a month or 2 or 3, or maybe even a little bit longer, but it doesn't get done if you don't put that in there, just like our crops. Just like our livestock, if we don't make plans, it doesn't happen. So you're worth it. Please make sure that it does happen for you. What are your options? Well, you can evaluate and narrow them. And your team can make you aware of some of those. Things like 1031 like-kind exchanges. How do I keep more and minimize my taxes? How do I make things work within my family? I have an example, one family that everyone lived in other states, and so they decided to sell their farm, ensure it remained a farm, and go somewhere else where they could be closer to their family and buy a business there, and they avoided some amazing taxes that we have here in the Northwest. So things like that, looking at the creativity. Maybe a conservation easement or a working land trust is on your radar or not. It just means creating that plan. There's going to be a lot of operational and financial data to gather, and somebody has to manage the flow. Somebody's in charge. So that means there's going to be roles and responsibilities as part of this, just like there are today on your farm. If you do not have an operational manual, make one. My grandpa used to go and start the tractor every day, and I grew up on that farm. And even up to the point that I would come back from college and help out with things. I never thought to ask my grandpa, why do you whack the side of the tractor to get that thing started? Well, it doesn't start unless you do that. I never asked him all those years. So when he sent me out one day to go down in the field and feed the cows, I could not get the tractor started. I didn't even think to go over there and whack it. There are things that need to be whacked in your business enterprise, and you know what they are. Share them. Help people succeed. You've had a lot of experience of what works and doesn't work, and so share it. And developing both those strategic and tactical plans, so day-to-day and higher level. Those are things that you'll do, and you might find you have some fun along the way. It's going to be critical that you know the value of the business, and later in my presentation here, we're going to go through the dull, boring list of assets, and I think your eyes are going to be opened a little bit that you probably have more than you think. All right? So what are some of your considerations? Protecting your assets. This is a key responsibility that you as an owner of your business have. And you think you have done it. You know, I file my taxes, I'm a nice person, I pay my bills. That's not enough. Your business structure is going to be critical. I had a farmer that he was worth a little over $8 million, and he, late one night, saw a young woman stopped alongside the road, and she had a flat, and she couldn't change it. Well, he offered to change the flat, but she refused to take her little kids out of the back of the car. They had been very sick, and it was cold and wet, and so the long and the short of it is, the car slipped off the side of the road with the little kids in it. That $8 million farm that he has worked his entire life on, always paid his bills, the sweetest people you could ever ask to know. It was a sole proprietorship in his name. The mother sued him, and she got everything. And when I say everything. And so his sons, who had moved back, left great jobs, they didn't end up with anything. It was really a very sad thing. So you need to think about asset protection. And it's more than just not stopping alongside the road. What if you pull out in front of somebody? Something very innocuous that you wouldn't expect. It can just happen in a split second. Your business structure matters, and it can determine whether you can do your transition like you plan or not. Who are the beneficiaries? Who do I wish for my assets to go to? And do I need to give some thought to their ability to manage those assets? I'm not sure you would like to be the farmer that gives your kids lots and lots of assets only to have them squander them away. You've worked far too hard. And it might not even be apparent to you that that's a problem they have. What happens if they get in a really bad car accident down the road and get hooked on pain meds? They've been a very responsible person their whole lives, but now they've kind of turned into a fiend. It does happen. Your beneficiaries also might change. When those of you that have joined our meeting today, I've had folks that have up to 7 children, and their transition plan was their children, and all 7 of them preceded them in death. Do you have contingencies for what happens if plans change? And you should make them. Communications, I think, are very important in the process, and developing a flow of information and documenting it, because it can ensure your wishes are preserved as you do things. Do you have wishes for charitable or generational gifts? Think about that. Maybe there's something that you've always wanted to do to take care of somebody, and this could be part of your dare to dream that you'd like to put in place. Contractual obligations. Fully understanding those can limit or those can enhance what you do. Contracts can be very, very helpful in a sales process or getting valuation for buyers. So it could certainly help your children out or your key employees if they're looking at buying your business so that you have income to live on. You can deal with the later stage costs in your life. Elder care is attention getting. I have many clients that are in their late 80s and 90s now. In the past month, I have had 4 of those clients, long-term clients, pass away. And so those that did a really good job on elder care planning were very glad. Incapacity can happen so unexpectedly, or it can happen over time. Make sure that you do your wishes now while you have the ability to make those decisions before something can happen that prevents you from making them. Estate planning is something that is not as scary as it seems. Your estate is everything you have, business and personal. And when we get to the asset list, I'm going to invite you to make a list of what those all are and the preferences of what you'd like to have. Financial planning is another key thing, making sure that you have enough for the things that you'd like to do. Odds are that you're going to live a good long time. I've had a chance to observe probably close to 2,000 clients over the last about 20 years. And guess who lives the longest of my clients? It's my farmers. You guys are out working hard, and you ladies are out working extremely hard as well. And so you have had a healthy lifestyle. Little did you know you had your own built-in gym in what you go and do every day. And so, but that has led to you having probably a chance at living a good long time. And so making sure that you have the resources that you need. Can you age in place? It's way cheaper if you can age in place, and it's a lot nicer to be in your home or near your home. So those are things that you can look at. Human resources are certainly a part of it if you have people who work on your farm, whether they are your family or if they are just employees that are not key employees. They're just great people who work for you. They are scared to death when you say you might be selling your property or you're developing an estate plan. If you do not keep the channels of communication open, you could find that a very valuable key employee leaves because they're afraid their job is about to go away and they think they need to do something. So you need to give some thought to when you bring people in and describe what you're doing so that they feel comfortable. Also making sure there are resources that make this business viable after you leave. If you're dependent on a payout, maybe you have an installment agreement that someone is going to pay you. You want to know that you've left the business not buried in debt and that they can begin. Maybe you could spend some time updating what you have or exploring resources for funds. NRCS has some great programs. Soil and water conservation districts also have them, as well as others. And now with COVID, there are going to be additional resources to help make sure that our farms and ranches can remain viable. I think there are lots of risks in your transition, and I've only listed a very few of them. There are probably about 18 of them, and in my class I have you work through those to just contemplate how would you deal with this, how would you deal with that. And there are things that your attorney, your accountant can urge you to take and put in place to protect it. Maybe you do not want to have your land go to anyone else other than in the family. You can make that part of your estate plan and your trust if you make one. The thing that tends right now, I'm seeing forcing farmers and their families to lose out on farms or to be strapped with incredible debt are taxes. Some states do have estate or gift taxes, and there is the federal estate tax. So it's almost 11.5 million and getting ready to go up again per person. So you may not have a problem on the federal side, but you want to know if you have one on the state side, because if you do, it's going to look at a different strategy. As an example, here in Oregon, the estate tax is anything over $1 million is taxed at 10%. So that means that nearly every farmer and rancher is immediately being taxed 10% of their net worth. And that can lead the family to not be able to even keep the farm. They have to sell it. If I could help you hear this one, this would be the one I would really ask you to listen to. And I have the slide that is going to come up when we go to the family dynamics session that will help you understand this is a serious problem. I'm looking across the aging of America, and it's not just in other industries. It's very prevalent in farms. In fact, the average age of people in farming far exceeds corporate America because you all have hung on a long time. It's going to mean that we have to take steps in order to take care of you and the farm program. There's also a component of timing when you do this and what you do. If you're trying to gift and minimize your estate, and let's say you raise cattle, the time that you gift is not when you're ready to take them to market and take them to the sales yard. You gift them when they're calves. You can gift literally hundreds of thousands of dollars and still be legitimate by doing that. That's an example of working with someone who understands ag. And you can do that throughout the crops or what you raise. Here's some of the statistics I alluded to. And these are climbing. 88% of family-owned businesses, and farms are right in there. Of those 88% that are ready to transition now to the next generation or to someone, only 30% of them achieve that from the first generation to the second. And that's because of lack of planning. It doesn't happen, whether it's taxes, people don't understand the logistics, there hasn't been enough communication. There's a lot of reasons, but it doesn't happen. And 12% of those generations that made it to the second one, only 12 make it to the third generation. And if you go on down and you start looking to get into fifth and sixth generations, it gets into single digits. You can change the tide on that. This transition should have, I believe, two components. Both what is going to happen within your transition and the successor group that's going to buy it. If you want to preserve your farm, that increases the likelihood it's going to make it yet another generation and get past these statistics. So I think that that's just a really wise thing, and I hope you'll consider it. It's a little work. I have some farmers that have actually made it a requirement as part of their farm transition that the next generation is going to join in and learn. Your exit strategies, most of the time we don't think about exiting our farm. We live there, we work there. But you can choose to close the business, sell it, sell everything off, and whatever happens, happens. Or you can choose to transfer it. But before you just sell it, please understand all of the ramifications. In many cases, you may have favorable treatment on your timber, your land, your property, and if you sell it, you might find that it's no longer zoned agricultural or the benefits of that are lost. Some jurisdictions literally go back up to 20 years and go backwards and re-tax the most recent owner as if it was a commercial property or a residential property and not agriculture. That can cost some farmers hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in back taxes. You're going to want to know the rules in your area. You also want to know the rules on gifting. Right now, the federal government says you can give $15,000 a year per person. And if you are a married couple, you can gift $15,000 each. You can reduce the value of your estate very quickly and get it below any thresholds and minimize your taxes. You can also do some of the things that feel important to you based on your values. But be very clear, what is my exit strategy? Do I want to take a step back and I start moving away part-time? I know some operations don't lend themselves to that. Dairy cows don't say, oh, let's work 3 days a week and the rest will be fine, or 1 day a week. It doesn't work that way. There has to be someone else. Farmers have had to work so hard over the years. It's one of the reasons I enjoy working with you. You are brilliant people. You're incredibly hardworking folks. And yet you have challenges that make you work really long hours. I don't know many farmers that work 40 hours a week, or 50, or 60. So I'd like to be sure that your exit strategy reflects how hard you've worked over the years and takes care of you into the years to come. This tends to be a really big issue in farm and ranch transitions. I grew up in a household where everyone said, we're just going to divide it. There's two of you, 50-50. Now, does it seem fair if you stayed behind and made sure that the farm operated all these years and it's there because of you, and the other person gets half of it, and you've put incredible investments into something? Probably not. Perhaps some children have moved away and been given the opportunity to go to med school, to grad school, to law school, to become an accountant. And someone else has stayed behind and made all of that possible. This is the time to true that up, to make sure that things do work. And I would like to put in a cautionary rule. If you don't, and one of your heirs feels particularly disenfranchised, and in other words, not treated fairly, they have some really good grounds to tie up your estate in court, and they will be very successful at it, and they'll run up the bills. So I would definitely deal with this and make sure that this is taken care of up front. And it treats people, we're not about a penny for a penny. It's about what is going to make the farm transition work and what is needed for the rest of the family. Only you know the concerns. Do you have a family member that has special needs? They need more health care. And so they're going to need more money as a result of that. That would be an example of fair is not equal. Sometimes it's distance, and sometimes they really don't want anything. They personally cannot afford. I've had people who literally returned their gift. They could not afford the impact on their own personal finances, and they returned it. They don't want it. So it's a really good thing to talk about fair versus equal. And I applaud farmers for being so hardworking all these years, but you also have one other characteristic that I'll call it out. You tend to be pretty private about your financial arrangements and everything that you have, probably even more so than a typical business, maybe a manufacturing, a law practice, a retail store. You keep it very close to the chest. As a result, your family don't know what you have. Maybe you've even given messaging over the years. There's just no money for that. There's no money for that. My own mom is kind of humorous and not. That was what she said. You could have just pushed the record button and then played it back every time when you would ask about something. There's no money for that. When my dad had to go and be flight lifted for life, and I had to take over everything on the farm for 4.5 months, wow, what did I find? There could have been a lot more things along the way. That also is the reason why my brother never came back and did things, because he thought there was no money. So be careful at what your messaging is doing and causing people to make choices. They might also be prepared to help out if the finances are the other way and you need some help. They may love the family farm and want to help preserve it. So putting our puzzle together, you're going to gather information. I'm going to give you some tools to do that. We're going to evaluate where you are, what you need, and make some plans that work for you once you know the options that are available. And there are going to be some gaps. Finding ways to fill those gaps. There are a lot of resources. And an action plan. But most of all, you have to execute. You can plan and plan, but if you don't get down to brass tacks of putting it in place, it doesn't happen. Only 30%, and this is a national statistic, 30% of farmers and ranchers that actually go through the entire planning process ever move forward and finalize it. And so as a result, they've still left everything in jeopardy, even though they know things. And there are reasons why they don't do it. But at the end of the day, you are in the driver's seat, and I'd like you to be able to stay there. And so to do that, let's work on that team that helps you. Perhaps a business accountant, a business attorney, and I'm saying with an ag background on both. A business appraiser, don't go out and get a business appraisal right away on your farm. The reason being, if you're going to have the buyers take out a loan and they're going to go to, let's say, FSA, or they're going to go to some other organization, they have their own appraisers. I don't want an appraiser to have to be done twice. It gets very expensive. If you're going to do a 1031 like-kind exchange, that requires an IRS approved appraiser. There are very few of those. So you have to make sure that the appraisal that you want is the one for suits your needs. Perhaps you're needing somebody to act as an independent to help facilitate things. I've had a lot of families that have had a really hard time in the transition. And I had one that was really sweet. The dad said the transition will never happen. I have 2 girls and they can't fix the tractor. And I said, well, how old's the tractor? Well, it's an old Alice Chandler. I got it back in like the 30s or 40s. And I said, well, so a tractor is what is holding up your transition? I'd like you to hear what you're saying. He had never heard himself really saying that before. Did you ever ask the girls, are they interested? Well, they don't show much interest. They don't come out. Their kids don't do much of anything. So we began family meetings and we started working on things, and come to find out, the kids thought that their dad did not want them to be doing anything. So finally he went and he bought a tractor, a newer one. And those girls, he has to argue for tractor time. That farm transition is happening. Those folks are able to transition. And so I think it's things like that sometimes when you can't see how to get over it, maybe someone from the outside can help you. If you're going to come into a lot of money or you're going to run into some bumps, I do believe that a financial planner can help open your eyes to different things. Really looking at all the different sources of funds you have. If you have outside retirement, perhaps an annuity that you can put in place. And I would say now, for any of you that have young children in your family, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, help make transitions possible for future generations. Go buy a whole life policy. While they're young, it's cheap. I bought one on my kids. It's $5 a month. And it is part of my planning to enable them to be able to buy each other out if the time comes, or to actually have access to some capital if they need it in the transition. So remember, and when your kids are even in their 30s, it's way cheaper. When they get into their 40s and 50s or beyond, it is cost prohibitive. So the key is do it while they're young. Your banker might be very important. So include them confidentially on what you're thinking of doing. And confidentially is very important. You have supply contracts. I don't want to mess anything up. So it's very important to maintain a level of confidentiality in what you do. If you work with a business broker, that can be another way to sell your business if you don't have a ready buyer or know of anyone or an heir. However, they cost money. And so you could be looking at the cost of selling your actual physical property in the neighborhood of 7 to 9%, most realtors. And then you could be looking at a business broker fee of another 15 to as high as 20%. That takes a big bite out of what you thought you would have for income at the end of it. So give some thought to see if you can find your own buyer. You'll be way better off, and you can actually give them 3 years. Most of the time, they need 3 years to qualify for a loan. So they could get 3 Schedule Fs under their belt while they're transitioning into your farm. It's a thought. Your insurance agent can be another partner in this process, making sure that you have the right kind of insurance. And most folks don't invite their insurance agent out to their property. I would ask you to maybe rethink that. Insurance agents can see a lot of risks and recommendations and things they can do to help you as you do things. Family. Family is so precious, and it's largely why you're doing this. And so give some thought to the weaknesses and strengths of your kids. And that gives you, be honest. This is not the time to be forgiving. It is time to be very candid about their strengths and their weaknesses. And maybe you can give them experience so that they can have an opportunity to learn when you can help control the outcome so that they can get beyond maybe some of the things they might not, shouldn't be doing. Please remember that there are small business development centers throughout the United States. The SBA was started due to farming. When in the 80s, we started losing our dairy farms right and left, the SBA was formed through Congress. And initially it was largely an agricultural organization to help farms be sustainable. It then was expanded to where they went into more broad roles and lots of businesses. And as a result, there are SBAs that are funded. Each state, the state SBA funds small business development centers, or SBDCs, for which that's where I'm from. And they fund through colleges and universities throughout your state. Those folks can do low and no cost training. They can help with counseling and coaching. So there are possibilities there. Think about your staff, if you have some, or if you need some. Perhaps staff is a way to develop a transition plan, whether it's someone that allows you to take a step back. I had a farmer that he raised a variety of vegetable crops, and he was also a nurseryman. And lifting those huge nursery plants, you need to be pretty strong. And when he got into his 80s, he couldn't hardly do it anymore. His revenues went down from over, and the net income, I'm talking here, from over $1 million a year down to $20,000 a year, because he did not deal with the fact he needed staff. So don't be afraid to step up and say, I need a helping hand. And it can make sure that your transition can happen, and it's much more pleasant for you. It should be part of your dare to dream. This is what I would like for me. I'd like for my family. And so I don't think retirement is a destination. I've never felt that when I retire, I sit on this easy chair, I cross my arms, and I watch TV all day. You are active. You've been active your whole life. It's time, as part of your transition, to also plan your next chapter. I find a lot of my farmers are incredibly capable of other things. I call it your Renoir years. Renoir did not become a painter. He was a civil servant and did not begin painting until after he retired from public service. And now his paintings sell for millions and millions of dollars. Maybe you see arts or volunteerism, or there are other things you'd like to do. One thing I'm seeing a lot of people become appraisers, about farms, and it's a viable career for many farmers. So think about that next chapter for you and write them down, but you just need to develop that table of contents for your business plan. You may not know what retirement holds in all areas, but you can develop the outline. And that's what I'd like to see and help you begin that process. I believe in every farm there's a legacy. I don't know how you live on property and you sacrifice. You give up a lot of things, and you probably are still giving up things, even though many of you have developed a successful enterprise. I want more for you, and I don't think this is a time to settle for less. I want you to know there's in-depth training that's available. I do it through my school, and I'm doing it for people in several states, actually. It's a virtual program, and we'll share that at the end of class. But I also want you to check with your local SBDC office, your USDA extension offices. They may have training that also helps you. FSA has a retirement training program. Nationwide Insurance in their ag program has retirement training for farmers and ranchers. There are resources out there for you. You don't have to go it alone. And if anything, I think you might have some fun at it because you've created something pretty amazing and you can work toward the dynamics. So now I'd like to show poll results if we could, Greg. And let everybody see what our class demographics look like. And, oh, okay. Well, we can come back to that if you need them to take the other. I don't know if they can see the graph on what I'm seeing, the results. I'm seeing that about a third of you are just starting the transition process according to this. About 20% of you are looking at doing it within the next 3 years. That's a pretty big jump. Realizing that that's 55% of our class today. You're starting to look like the rest of America. Several of you are in the 5 to 7%, like 7% of you were there. And 13% of you are in the 10 plus years. And there's a nice group of you, 27%, that think you've got it all done. So I think that you cross a lot of boundaries here. I hope you've gained some things in this that help you reconsider it. And I hope I fuel your engines just a little bit to keep after it. I know I am soft-spoken, but I am passionate about farming. I kind of like to eat. I think the rest of America likes to eat. And I like to control where it comes from. You know, sometimes when I buy stuff in the store, I've made this mistake very rarely, but you know, it looks so good and I buy it and I don't look where it's from. And the next thing I know, I don't feel well after I eat it. And I see it came from another country that does not have the standards we have. Or one of them, I mean, I literally started to break out after I ate it because of whatever they used. So I think it's critical. And sometimes when farms are lost, they are lost. People are buying it. Sometimes it's not even being operated as a farm. It's a gentleman's ranch or an executive ranch, and they have 4 llamas and 2 chickens, and they call it a farm. There's more to farming than that, and you know it, and I know it. I think we're in a position to make sure that we stay farmers and that what we have done over the years matters. And I wouldn't give away the store now, and I hope you don't. All right, we're going to do a breakout session here in just a moment. And right before we do that, I'm going to show you how, some things to look at, and then we're going to go to the Q&A session. Because I think looking at your assets is something that a lot of people, well, what am I talking about, Dana? I have my assets. I have my bookkeeper do my books. I know where I'm at. Let me make sure my screen is showing. There we go. And this is something I'm going to share with each of you so you can look at it. You have so many assets, the typical ones, your crops, your livestock, your land, your homes, your buildings, and so on and so forth. But I think there are more to the asset story than you're looking at. The age of the crop. How old is your apple orchard? How old is your vineyard? What are the varietals? How mature is something? Is there something wrong with it? So that maybe that needs to be discussed if you have a blight or whatever. If you have a registered livestock. So I used to raise horses, and I had a stud that was out of dash for cash. And so it's things like that that have a unique value that need to be told in your story. And the breeding cycles. Do you enjoy going out in January to calve when it's colder than blitzing out there? Maybe you're going to shift when the bull goes into the herd so that it can be more like the end of February, early March, so it's not quite so cold. So there's a whole lot of things you might do that you're in there. They're non-traditional. I have seen many animals raised not for pets. There are people that raise chickens for their feathers and to stuff them. Everything is like that. There are people who want to wear bird feathers on their clothes and in their hair. And fly fishing, you know, if you're a fly fisherman, you know what I'm talking about. You can get some great feathers for that. Aquaponics and hydroponics have become an amazing industry. I have a farmer in the Portland area that he has an 800 square foot building, and he has a 400 family CSA. He literally feeds 400 families for all of their vegetables in that little building with 3 stories high in his aquaponics. It's pretty amazing. I have clients that do the big game thing. They have large acreages and they keep the bison or they keep the deer and the elk in. Through my place, I get about 2,000 huge elk through a year. And so you can have some major trophy hunting on your property. Maybe you have birds of prey or other exotic animals. Maybe you raise those bugs. I didn't realize how valuable bug farmers can be, but someone brought me along in that area. Understanding your contracts, that is an asset. Whether you realize it or not, it can go into the valuation of your business if you have solid contracts for the sale, for the production, and so forth of what you have. In harvesting, the contract for the people to come out and pick your blueberries is invaluable. There are some people that can't find anybody to come out and pick their crops or harvest it. So those are very valuable. Do you have non-compete or other exclusive contracts? And let us know if you have grants or you're interested in that. That can be very valuable that you have in place. Special programs. Do you have like the CRP? Our military members are now getting into lots of programs, Boot to Dirt, Arms to Farm, where you can get money for people to come out. They're getting out of the military and they just don't want to go back into a civilian job. They want to create their own, and they have really good work ethic, which our troops are amazing people. And so that could be another alternative for you. Are you a turnkey operation? You do the shipping of everything that you raise. You have a customer list. You grow everything that's needed for your customers on that list. Maybe it's some of the other things that you have on that list. I want you to look at your home with new eyes today. What do I have? And maybe you need somebody else to join you that isn't there all the time that sees it, because it might have tremendous value. I was really taken back by somebody approached me and said, I will pay you $5,000 a week if my family per person can come out and spend a week at your farm. I just have a place to live. And I'm like, now let me understand this. You're going to clean my horse stalls and you're going to pay me to clean my horse stalls and chase my horses around the pasture and do things? Sure enough, they wanted the experience. So you might have assets you don't think. How about rocks? Do you have lots of rocks on your property? You might have a gravel deposit. You might have a decorative stone deposit or something that's semi-precious. Look at the real estate assets. There are just so many. And there are many that are atypical. So I put that in a list for you that I've worked with on people, as well as things relating to water, any other deposits you might have mineral, or that hilly, rocky field that you have. Maybe it would be a great, 50 rotating solar PV thing, and you could earn $20,000 a month, like one of my farmers did. And they couldn't farm it anyway. So that might be an alternative. And your fill dirt might be very, very profitable. So anyway, I've just tried to provide you a list of things, but Greg and Sleaze will help me make sure you have access to this, and hopefully it will help you in that process. So should we open it up for some questions here quick?
Yes, people are welcome to unmute themselves and share their question, or share a question in the chat box.
it's okay to be shy. We're going to put you in a breakout here in a moment. And so we're going to put you into a couple groups if you don't have any questions to help you discuss some of the things that you have and maybe surface some things you'd like to share with the class from your group. Well, what if we go to the breakouts? What if we did that?
Okay. Well, I will place everyone into, we're going to do breakouts of about 3 or 4 people. So you'll get a notification up on your screen to join a breakout room. And like Diana said, just it's a great opportunity to share what's worked for you or other great resources that you have found very helpful. This farmer to farmer aspect is really helpful in learning about things that have been helpful or maybe things that haven't been quite so helpful to release to your people. So I will send you to breakout rooms, and Amber will come back to your question when we come back.
Okay.
All right, looks like our break has come to a close. And Diana, I shared the second poll here about who's considering transferring their business to a family member.
Isn't that interesting? 30%. The rest aren't sure, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Very interesting. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? How do you feel about the statistics? I think it tells me farm and ranch planning is more important than ever before. Is what I'm thinking. All right, let me make this big and I will share our next presentation. All right. It looks like everyone's back. Interesting. Okay. All right. My slideshow. All right. Okay. There we go. All right. So we're ready to return? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming back. Hope you grabbed a bite to eat or stretched your legs a little there. Family dynamics. When I get to this one, I don't know, I grew up on a farm with a lot of chickens and those roosters were something else. All right. Family dynamics. And the reason I chose a rooster is because it really is something that requires attention. And for anyone bound around roosters, they expect attention and get nothing less. Family dynamics are very powerful. I think they're not understood in many cases. Imagine the dynamics of your kitchen table. You probably sat at the same place meal after meal, year after year. There was a dynamic around that table where mom and dad sat, where grandma and grandpa or other people sat, as well as where you, and if you have siblings, where you sat. Well, some of those dynamics are good, some not so good. What if there was kicking under the table? What if there was somebody who felt that they weren't really valued? If you decided to have a family meeting at the family table and someone found that to not be a great place for them, you might be sorry you had the meeting there. That's what I mean by not understood. They're subject to change because I find times when everybody is getting along and other times when they're at odds with each other for different reasons. And so it is subject to change. And in my belief, it is probably the single most impactful reason of why transitions do or do not happen. But I refuse to accept that they can't be addressed and worked with. And that's why I believe they are manageable. You just have to take steps. So I think that's where you need to acknowledge and explore. Similar to my little farmer that thought his girls could never operate a tractor. I asked him, so why can't you have a tractor that either they can learn to repair, that they can get parts today, or maybe maybe they need to be involved in picking out the tractor if they would be involved. And so they did. And I thought that was a great success story. And they've developed a great farm stand, and that is turning out to be an awesome little business for his two daughters. And he's able to sit back and enjoy that. And his wife is very happy. She was very hesitant when she came to some of our meetings because she did not want her girls to have their feelings hurt. She thought they would just then never come back and visit her again. And so I think there are dynamics that we have to look at in our farm and ranch transitions. And so identify them. What are your concerns? What are my concerns? Maybe the kids have told you things, but maybe what they've told you isn't exactly what they're saying. What if you've had a child that says, sure, I'm going to come back. I'm going to help you take over the farm. And then 3 years go by and 5 years go by and they still haven't come back. Oh yeah, but I'm going to return. You can count on me. Well, what is holding them back? Is it their career? Is there some other consideration that they haven't really shared with you? You kind of have to be able to talk through that. How do I propose to do that? It starts with family meetings where someone's taking notes. And there's an entire process around this. You don't just sit down and say, okay, we're having a meeting. You need to have some training before you jump right into that sometimes, but you need to get started on them. And there needs to be an agenda and a time so that everyone can participate. And today we're learning something really valuable. Many of your children may not even be living in the same town or even same state that you live in. And so with the technology we have available, whether it's Zoom, Skype sometimes can be a very valuable tool in having those family meetings. And you can see each other. And I urge you, whenever you have a family meeting, that nobody is allowed to black out or not be able to see them. You need to be able to see people's expressions and their reactions. It's just very helpful in understanding what's really being said by people. So this is a great tool and it brings people together. And you develop a timeline for these meetings. When we're going to have them, is it monthly? I have some people that the last Friday of every month, they get together. And well, before COVID, they used to go to the restaurant and have lunch. Now, you know, they order takeout and have Zoom. So people have to find what's going to work for them, but have those meetings and be consistent and know that they're not always going to be just the way you hoped they would go. Who are all the players and what are their roles? There are risks. And if there are a lot of tempers that are going to be flying, I really recommend a counselor in there to help facilitate the meeting and say things you can't or shouldn't say. And then develop contingencies if this happens. Be thoughtful. When I go into a meeting, when I've had staff, I don't manipulate it to make it come out the way I want, but I want to be sure that it is a safe environment for everybody to kind of talk. And there are specific objectives that need to be sorted out. We need to come to conclusions on things. Your farm transition is no different. You have to be able to help people get off center and do things. An example of this would be, you have a meeting and this person agrees, I'm going to be the one to go talk to planning and zoning. We need to find out what we can and cannot do with our property. And I would urge everyone to make that visit and dig deep. You might find that you have the ability to put an additional home on the property. There are water rights you didn't fully understand that you had. There's a whole series of things you want to know. Well, let's say that person still, time after time, has not done it. There needs to be a firmness that this gets done, and you make a commitment to that. That's what you need from everyone. If they choose not to do that, and you're wanting them to be an heir, perhaps you need to rethink how much of a role you're going to allow them to be in the property. If they time and again don't step up, then maybe it's time to start looking at a farm manager because they're not going to live up to their commitments. If you ask them to go out and buy a baler so that you can get the hay baled, do they run out and buy the new Massey Ferguson $85,000 model? Or do they go out and get a more conservative model because they know they can fix it? And so you keep money in the business. Look how they act when they do things. Are they ready to be a business person? And as you're going through a transition, most families don't think about performance reviews. You should, because they need to hear candidly, this worked well, gosh, I wish you would have done this a little different. They need to also hear your praise. So it comes with both sides of the coin, but you need to have expectations, and there need to be people that are held accountable for what they do. You'll find your transition goes very differently. They don't get to play the, oh, I'm your kid and I've always been allowed to get off the hook card. That no more. We're adults, and if they're going to play that card, they're probably not somebody you want to hang your hat on for your transition. So you start now, you schedule those meetings. The first meeting, when you schedule it, I like it to be non-threatening. It used to be we could all meet in a restaurant. Maybe now to the point you can go to the local park, or everybody can order a pickup and we're going to meet at this time virtually. But it's just to introduce, we're starting to work on farm transitions. We're not going to make any decisions today. We're just here to inform you that we're getting started. What a great way to introduce in a non-threatening way. We're just getting started. In fact, you'll probably see a lot of relief from people when you do that. Then you can start getting into the more complex things, scheduling meetings. Let's divide this up. What's the real estate values? How are the books? How's the operating manual? You as the owner of the property, the owner of the business, you don't have to do it all. You can rely on others to help you. And you'll find in doing that you get an amazing product at the end, instead of it's all you and you're tired. And you need to think about really what you're doing. My mom was a sweet lady, and she had a fire safe, and she planned, and she always put everything in there, and she kept the key to the fire safe in her pocket, in her jeans. And I think a person would have to wrestle her to death to get that away from her. When she had her stroke, when she left the house, she had her pants on. When they came, I know they were in her pants. Her pants got lost somewhere when she went to the first hospital before they took her to the next one. We never found the key to the fire safe. And so as a result, it delayed getting into it and a lot of things that were required in order to get going forward. So understand your complexity and make some contingency plans, and let somebody throw rocks at it. In corporate America, we call it emergency response planning. We let somebody say, we're going to have an incident, and how are you going to respond to that emergency? Well, put some on paper on your farm. They don't have to be real, but how are people going to respond? See what they say they're going to do. So after you get through those pieces, you develop the timeline with everyone involved. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's what we're thinking, subject to change. Lots of people have adjusted their timelines due to COVID or other things. So, but make your timeline something that is achievable and within your realm. If you say my farm transition is going to happen when I'm 105 years old, well, I think that is an amazing goal to have. I really think it may not be one that is objective, because you may be a bit tired at that point, and I hope you're still here. And so pick a reasonable one. You know your health. You want to make sure knowledge transfer happens. And then I want you to fully explore the attributes to your business. Look at that asset listing that I gave you and dig into it. And it's by no means inclusive of everything. You know your property. One family I worked with were always disgusted by all the rocks that they had out there. And one person actually took them to a gemologist and said, what is this? I mean, they're covered all over our property. They're just plain old brown rocks. Turns out they were opals. And they had an entire opal deposit all over their farm in Grants Pass, Oregon. So they are now opal farmers, and people come and dig them. And it has made their transition very different. So know your business attributes and explore them. And when they talk about SWOT, again, that's a corporate America term for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But do it. Really take the time to do these procedures. You put in the time to create a successful farm, and you work at it. To me, this is like a pie. I take a little bit of it at a time. I rarely eat a whole pie all at once, unless you're my brother. And take it and get started. And this should really get you going. There are only 2 million farms in the United States right now, slightly over. If you turn the clock back to 1935, there were over 7 million. And there were 2.2 million farms in 2007. We're losing more farms every day than are being created or transferred to a family member. We are losing them. And some you don't get back when they pave and turn it in to a parking lot, a shopping mall, multifamily housing unit, or all these fancy little farms for 5 and 10 acres that people put multi-million-dollar houses on. Those just don't come back to farming. So I think it's a challenge for us as farmers. You're really pioneers today. You may not be getting into, a wagon and a team of horses, but you are pioneers, because figuring this out makes you a pioneer. And it will also give you a great deal of confidence in the things that you do. I can't imagine anything more fulfilling than being able to say, we successfully got through our transition. Wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. Please acknowledge the fare is not equal in most cases, and really look at what that could be. So if you had someone living on the property for many years and they lived rent-free and the other family member lived off, maybe you can make some adjustment for that. But then on the flip side, that person worked 70, 80 hours a week and you never came to help on the farm. That's another adjustment the other way. Use those to help people understand how the transition can work. And usually family members, some may be thinking about money. But what happens when somebody says, oh, I saw on the paper, here's a piece of property for 85 acres and it just sold for $10 million. Well, you guys have a piece that big. Could I get part of $10 million? Let's sell yours. Let's get a bunch of money. By the time you pay all of the taxes on capital gains that will go with some of that, and some of the other local taxes that probably apply, you won't end up with $10 million or 5 or probably even a third of that. And so sometimes it makes sense for them to get far less because that's what they're going to get anyway. And that's where an accountant and an attorney can help you understand that. And it can be a tool to help everyone understand how we can make this farm transition work. I think there are reasons to do this instead of just folding your arms and saying, when I'm dead, I'm dead. First of all, your future living matters. And I would want to be very clear on what my expectations and my goals are. And what are your intent for healthcare? Do you have civic priorities? If you have been very active in your community, and I know that many of you are, and you sell it to someone very objectionable, you may find that people don't talk to you in the grocery store, or even they're not willing to have lunch with you anymore. And you thought these people were your best friends for the last 40 years. They're so mad at you. And so think about your civic priorities and how what you're doing might affect people. It's really about maintaining those relationships for the family and your community. You might do things differently. One gentleman thought, I just want to sell this place. I just want the money and I'm going sailing. I have had enough to do with cows my whole life. I am not doing it again. And he went and bought a really nice sailboat and he was just going to sail the rest of his life. Well, it was really cool for the first few years, but then it wasn't so cool. And so if he would have bought a smaller sailboat, he could have kept part of his farm and come back to that as a base. And he ended up having a lot of help to be able to buy part of his farm back so he could do that very thing. So give some thought to the fact that, like it or not, there are ties to that land, and they will follow you. When I headed off to college, man, I was never going to be a farmer again. It was in my rear view mirror. I was enough of working those long hours and chasing the cows and horses and everything. Well, that lasted for 5 years. And then I made the choices to get back into it again because I missed it. I missed the calves. I missed the colts. I missed being around them. So you're going to find that it comes back. You're going to find out about your estate and property taxes and so many other things. I know during COVID right now, it's pretty hard to get an appointment with the Social Security office, but they'll do Zoom meetings just like this. Find out what your benefits are and your options, and ask some of the difficult questions. If this person precedes me in death, if my spouse precedes me, what can I expect? And if I precede them, what can I do? You might be surprised at the answers, and it could really help you fill it in terms of your financial needs. Most of us need something to live on, and we are not so independently wealthy that we don't need some money. So see what that looks like for you. If it's about preserving your heritage, you know, you grew up there, you're a 5th generation farmer, and everybody knows your family, and they've bought beef for you for generations, that's something. And maybe you'd like to find a way to preserve some of that. I do believe that the viability, not only, and I have Oregon in there, but the viability of farms across the United States is critical. Not only do we like to eat, but here's a statistic I'd like you to think about. In farming and ranching, you put $20 back into the community for every dollar you generate in revenue, because that's what farming does. It touches, it has fingers out to so many different aspects. Most other businesses create maybe 3 jobs as a result. You create 20. We need farming. It's part of the economic viability of our country. 1% of the people in the United States are farmers. And you're doing one heck of a job. But now, how do we keep that going into the future? So I would like to invite you to really go back to the driver's seat. You get to make the choices. And you don't get to make them when you're dead. You get to make them now. And you can change them now, even if you have made them, unless you have done an irrevocable trust. A revocable trust can be changed and can be modified based on some of the things you learn. I think a transition is worth your time, and I think your farm or ranch is that. And I hope that you'll give people a chance, even if it cannot be in your family. And if we look at the statistics in our poll, it appears that we have, you know, about 30% are looking to go within family members, and you're pretty sure it's going to go there. And we have 20% that it's going to go to a key employee or be sold otherwise. And the balance, you're just not sure yet. There's so many programs out there for beginning farmers, and you're going to learn more about that through Greg's various presentations this week. And there are just so many. The Soil and Water Conservation District, if you were looking for a model for probably the #1 internship program in the United States, look at East Multnomah County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I can send that address to Greg. They literally take in farmers, they do business plans, and here are farmers renting between a 1/4 acre to up to 2 acres, and they're making, just in a summer's work, $20,000 to upwards of $200,000. In this program, they are taught how to sell, how to produce crops, how to market what they have, and how to deal with all the things they're going to face in farming. And when they're done through this program, it's really, they're ready to go get a loan to buy a property or to do a long-term lease on a property and start their successful business outside the umbrella of the Soil and Water Conservation District. It's amazing. And I think sometimes thinking outside the box, that it just has to be us to one other person or two other people that it goes to, isn't the answer. They started with only 6 farmers and they're up to 15 farmers, and before long they're going to be in the high 20-some farmers. They're continuing to buy additional parcels around them. I think it's an amazing program. So that could be our schools. I am so pleased when I see the resilience of people interested in ag. The Future Farmers of America in the schools today, there are some really interested kids, and not all of them are farm kids. They just wish they could be a farm kid. Our soldiers want to return to something quiet. They've been through a lot, and they would like it. And there are just lots of reasons that people enjoy raising something. It's so gratifying. And so if you do not have a family member, I know there are people out there that are eager and willing. They may not know everything, but maybe you could share some of your knowledge and help them get that opportunity. So I really hope that you will. So we zipped through this really quickly, and our hope is that now we'll do a quick review and see if there are some questions that people have. We've been a quiet group, so what if we unmuted and heard questions that you might have? Any questions? Or I think, was there one in chat, Greg, that you had?
Yeah, Amber had shared that she wanted to mention the idea of values transitioning, where exiting farmers are able to customize their land and asset transition in order to the best benefit of their community and food system. Mm-hmm. So Amber, I don't know if you wanted to expand any more on that.
I think you actually covered it a little bit, Diana, in this last one, just talking about thinking what you leave behind for your community as a transitioning farmer. You know, especially if you're looking to transition outside of family members, being clear about what kind of legacy you want to leave behind for your community in terms of what your farm produces. And then also considering that asset being value to your personal values and maybe making a difference in the price in the transition.
Okay, thank you. And those are very viable options. Like I said, there are lots of people that are interested. And so they just need to get a chance for a start. So does anybody say, so we've gone through all this, but my word, where on earth do I start? I've been waiting for someone to say that.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
In terms of, if you are in a situation, we have a revocable trust. It's really a relatively small property. But we do want to leave something. We would like to have it go eventually to organic farming or sustainable regenerative farming, or maybe it's on a river. It could be land for hiking, a park or something like that. Eventually, our kids don't want it. But the current generation, there are 3 brothers, and one is autistic, Asperger's, and is living on the property, which creates issues. Is there, where do we go? I mean, in terms of, we have some leads because we're dealing with Liberty Land, Liberty Prairie people in near Chicago, outside of Chicago, Nathan Alberg. And he sent us to you. He said, you could get some ideas from you maybe, but finding a reliable person who has background in many different areas to try to you know, get counseling on how do you move where when you're dealing with that. That's a serious issue.
Well, I think this is one where you have to assess the person's ability to farm. I mean,
there's no ability to farm. There's ability to garden and not really even take care of himself. But he's living on the property, and we have to figure out a future for him and for the property. So, I mean, how do you find somebody's, we have the name of one person in Illinois that maybe does some, finding somebody who does kind of overall, they have ag ability, they have financial, we can't just go to a lawyer, we can't just go to an accountant, we can't get all those people in line until we have this issue figured out. And so I'm just throwing it out there to see if you have run into anybody who runs into these kinds of issues.
Well, I do. I have situations where, where the family member literally, like as an example, that farmer that he was making over $1 million and then down to 20,000. I mean, to allow an enterprise to drop to that, he wasn't even paying property taxes. And so he was going to lose the farm in pretty short order. So his daughter stepped in and began coming out to help him. And sometimes it takes that willingness on the part of family to step in and really come in and assess the issues. But where safety is concerned, it sounds a bit like this person
he's not doing any of the farming. He's just living there because his mother let him live there. And my husband has taken over dealing with the sharecrop farmer. So he's handling the farm business, but it's just kind of where to go for help on those kinds of issues.
Well, and it's finding resources to help this relative that's living there. Whether I don't know what their financial resources are, if they're
Social Security minimal.
Okay. So they would certainly qualify to go into a number of centers, but I would be very picky about the ones they went into. Some of us would not want to be in those. So you could look at that. You also want to think really long and hard about how you would structure any kind of transition of the property, because you could take away their benefits.
Well, that's the issue. And how do you find somebody who has the expertise in, how to the tax side of it? The issue is there are also investments in the trust. It's not just the farm property.
So elder care is probably one of the places I would send you, and there are not a lot of them. Every state has a few. And you want to look into an elder care attorney that can work with you on this, because they can give you some really good ideas of what you can and cannot do in your state.
Okay, so, and looking for elder care in Illinois, trying to find out if there are elder care attorneys. Would University of Illinois have any resources?
Does Illinois?
University of Illinois, do they have any resources like the small business, do they have farm resources?
So in terms of Illinois, and I have a lot of family that live in Illinois, and so people that have a lot of money in ag are land grant universities, of which the University of Illinois is one. And they get some pretty serious money. And I would talk to them, and I would literally call up their admissions office and talk to them to find out what they have in their ag and horticulture area.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. I thought, since nobody else is answering questions.
Yeah, so great question.
I came with, we come with that need, so thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think in transitions, it's really time to learn the options, because today we haven't really discussed hardly any options. We've really just tried to give you an overview of some aspects of transitions. And so the takeaway, one of them I'd like you to have, is anytime you work with any kind of a professional, or even yourselves, this form that I have in front of you, this Farm and Ranch Forest Transition, it would be very helpful if you filled this out. They know who the players are, what their relationship to each other is. If they were raised on the property, you are telling somebody in ag a whole lot if you tell them if they were raised on the property. Because farm and non-farm kids see things really differently, especially if there happened to have been a split between mom and dad and some of the kids went different directions. That's important, where it is physically located, because there are specifics within those townships and counties that affect it. The number of generations that the property has been in the family. If it's been there a long time, there could be some heritage opportunities, century farms, which mean there's other sources of money to help you. Because sometimes the way to help this relative, and like coming up with a 529 or something like that, where you can put some money in a special trust situation that does not affect them and their benefits, is critical. And so that an elder care attorney can help you with that. And just, I would look through these and take the time to fill them out, add other information as you have it. But what is the zoning, you know, just the general condition of the property, of what it's in. And if you have been on this property for many years, I had a sweet little lady that I worked with when she was 92. And we went to her property and she said, I need help selling this. And so I said, I understand. She had a house in town because she wasn't able to keep track of it anymore. And the rental thing never worked very well. And she looked out across it and always told me about the beautiful roses and all of the fruit trees that they had out there. And in her eyes, when she looked out across her property, she saw it for what it looked like back in 1972. You've got to kind of take the blinders off your eyes. And what does it look like now? I mean, we had 38 people who literally never got out of their vehicle to look at her property after they drove up. And so I finally convinced her she's going to have to sell it to someone who is a construction contractor, because nobody would do the kind of repairs that were required or could afford them other than a contractor. And so it's helping you really see the property and the attributes is important. And what crops are grown on there, and you want to know the history. Some of these properties, if you have any concerns potentially, like the kind of pesticides that have been used on a property, you need to own up to some of that. There are funds that might be able to help you do some of this topsoil removal, because you're going to fail a lot of tests if you go to sell it and people start doing sampling of the ground. You could also get sued big time for issues on water, contaminated water, if it's gone down there. I mean, I had some farmers that they just dump their oil and their whatever left over right out on the ground. And it was a really toxic situation on some properties. So really own up to what is out there so it can be worked on. Who owns what? I'm always amazed when I start a class and work with someone and they say, yeah, we have a farm out here and this is what we do. And, you know, my wife and I, we just manage it. And the next thing I know, it's 6 businesses from a tax filing standpoint. And they have 30 or 40 employees, and it's far more complex than they think. And so really acknowledge what you have, the type of business that it is, each one of them. And the summary of the operation is helpful. A CSA, for some folks, they don't know, that's kind of like a, you know, you get a basket of food each week. And so we agree to give you some greens or some fruit and veggies or meat, is what a CSA is in different parts of the country. But what goes on that farm might be helpful. You might find that the town or some other group is interested in it because of those very activities. I had the Air Force want to buy one farmer's property because it was perfectly situated for them to actually, you know, do different activities when they were teaching people survival training. So they could take the troops out there and, you know, put them through what they might face if they were ever captured. And so they bought it to do those things. Then I just continue to ask more questions on here just to get you thinking. And you can always add more that you think that it's appropriate. But what seems like a really easy transition to you could seem like a mountain to someone else, whether it's your children or someone else. You've got to understand the other person's side. What do they face? You have the land asset, you probably have the equipment and other assets, and you may have some financial resources that could make it work, and certainly industry contacts. They have the eagerness and desire to do it, and probably a good basic knowledge of raising crops or livestock, but they don't have anywhere near what you have. And I hope that you will include in your willingness to transition it a training time. You want them to be successful. Okay. Any thoughts, questions?
Do you work with just clients in Iowa, or
So I work with clients all over the United States, to tell the truth.
so you would have to you'd figure out the expertise you needed to work with the
Right.
local county and state issues?
Yep, the program that I have, I developed through Clackamas Community College in Milwaukee, Oregon. And I ended up being transplanted to Oregon. We had to rent out our farm in Spokane. Our daughter was in a really bad car accident. And so we moved up there 4 years ago to help deal with that issue. And many of the things are going to linger from that. So just like you, I've had to rethink things a little bit in my transition and get back to it. And so that's why I'm up there. But I've been all over the United States and actually kind of in a lot of countries. My husband was in the military and we moved 24 times. So I got to live and work in a lot of places.
I think you're about to say step number 1. Could you refresh us on that?
Step number 1 is this: fill this out. This is step number 1. You have to be able to fill out the overview, because you have to articulate what you have before anyone can help you begin a transition. This is it.
Okay. And this will be sent out by email.
Yep, you'll all get this, and you can certainly add to it, but this is a start of what you've got to prepare to get going. And I would also encourage you, we'll also share that listing of assets, and that's something that you can start. Again, you're busy folks. I bet you're not just looking for things to do every day. My kids learned early on, Mom, I'm bored. They don't ever say that to me. And so you can take a section of this at a time. I've learned to take maybe the first paragraph or 2 and I work on that. And when that's done, I work on the next. And before long, it's done. And I would urge you to do that sooner than later.
Do you have any advice on how do you in a sensitive way, ask an attorney or accountant who's been doing the taxes, for this property for what, 50 years or 30 years or whatever, whether they really have the expertise that you need to handle the issues that you're dealing with? I mean,
So,
I kind of feel like
a very
that can be an issue.
It can.
If you're the people in the older generation, first generation, second generation, we're always working with these same people.
So one of the first litmus tests I use is if someone is going to be up to the needs of my business is I look at how complex it is. Just because they're located in a small town doesn't make them automatically qualified to work with farmers. Do they come with you each year at tax time or along the way during the year to give you strategies and suggestions on how to operate your farm, minimize your taxes, looking forward how to manage your estate? If they are not doing those things, odds are that this is not their specialty. They just understand how to prepare your taxes and maybe help you a bit with your bookkeeping, but they're probably not going to be somebody that can help you really with the farm transition. And so I find there are a lot of partnerships between attorneys and accountants that they work together very well in the ag space. And so I interview. The way I would recommend finding someone is I ask them, so tell me, what kind of farms have you worked with? I know they can't, unless someone allows, signs a release, they can't give you names to go talk to. Word of mouth is very good. I find out what my neighbors had to say about this person did well, that person, I probably wouldn't go again. So I know who they worked with. And if they say they're a specialist in the ag area. So tell me about your childhood. Were you a farmer growing up? I ask attorneys that. I ask accountants that because they get things differently than someone who isn't. And then I'm going to find out the type of clients that they serve today. If they tell me they have 3 or 4 farms, I keep looking. I want somebody that really does farming and they've done it for years and they actively are helping people with estates and trusts. And the same with financial planners. I want them to understand what I have been through in an ag space. And maybe it's the Edward Jones person locally near you, or maybe you have to go somewhere else to someone. But I want someone who gets me. I don't just settle because they're just down the road 5 miles.
Thank you very much. I have to duck out, but thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Other questions? Well, I would like to invite everybody, and we'll send it out to you. The last share I'll do.
There is a question in the chat box about, can you provide a ballpark figure to set up an irrevocable trust? And that's from HP.
Yes. So that's a good question. And attorneys always dance around that, and accountants that I've talked to. And the truth is, to set up an irrevocable trust, it's going to totally be dependent on how complex you are. Do you have multiple business entities, multiple heirs? Do you have special restrictions that you need due to health or other considerations? But I see on the low end, the lowest I've seen a trust get set up for is around $4,000. And I see it go up from there. I have more complex that they're spending $10,000 and $15,000 to get it set up for an irrevocable trust. And I have one that they'll spend $200,000. They have 642 heirs. And they're going to have a very complex trust because they're taking all their nieces, nephews, grandchildren, everybody. They have a very big property. So, yeah, it can start fairly low. And you can ask them right up front. You shop. I used to be a CFO for a law firm, and I always appreciated people that wanted to understand how much things were going to cost. It helps you make better choices in terms of what it's going to cost you. So.
Thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, an appraisal can cost you on the low end maybe $2,500 to as much as $15,000 for a more complex thing. And if you have lots of equipment or specialized livestock, you might have to have multiple appraisals. Or if you have lots of mineral deposits, it's going to take somebody that has a background in that to help you with it. So, I think you have challenges ahead, but I know there are people out there to help you. And I would be glad to help folks that if you're feeling really lost, you just feel you're not sure what to do next, and you don't see that. I do have a class. It's 9 months. We meet in a similar environment as this. If you're in Oregon, you're welcome to come to class when we're allowed to go again. But the rest of the time, people are virtual. I also respect the fact that part of what made farming work for you is you're out in the middle of nowhere, and dial-up is not even great. And so many of the folks that attend my class, I have to send you a thumb drive because you can't even download stuff. And I think someone just raised their hand. HP?
No, that's all right.
Got it? Okay.
Well, actually, back on that irrevocable trust, thanks for providing that dollar figure. I started on this project about a year ago, and then I got delayed, and I need to get back to it. But I'm one of the elderly farmers, single, and no children, and no partner. So
Okay.
it has to go to members of the family.
Okay.
And it can't go to the sisters because when mother passed away 10 years ago, we all got a third share. So it can't go back to them again because they already had their share once.
Okay.
So we got to try to go to the nieces and nephews who aren't farmers at all.
Okay.
But to save the land, which is the third generation I've been farming. It's very, very high valued land in Iowa. It's some of the best in the world. So
Okay.
will not sell it. I want to keep it. So I thought about 100-year-old revocable trust, but I have to go in and see the man in the office.
Yeah. Yours is a unique situation. And, you know, a farm manager could also step in and help you keep up with things until you can either settle with nieces and nephews who may be interested in helping, or if not, then the farm manager operates it and takes care of the day-to-day things that need to happen. It's like the CEO or general manager of a business, and sometimes that's essential. I have some families that they have 15 kids and nobody will step up.
No, but I haven't stepped into that arena yet, and so it's time to get the family pulled together one of these days and just have a little chat to initiate the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my parents and grandparents kind of did, but it was pretty secretive, although the children knew, so there wasn't any apprehension, or there wasn't any problems. Everything flowed through smoothly. But hey, that's 20 to 30 years ago.
Sure. It's a very different climate now, and I do ask people to get going. Like you say, it's just different now. And if you wish to have your legacy, your wishes, and your values preserved, don't delay. Get started and work on it a little long, or at a more immediate pace based on time. And take care of yourselves. Develop your durable power of attorney if that should come in. And have any of you seen the 5 wishes document?
No.
It is a document that I urge people to incorporate into their will. It's accepted, I think, now in 38 states. It's not your will, but it talks about how you will be treated and cared for medically. And there's the medical side of things, and there's the business or operating side. And I think that should be part of everybody, because I have very specific things how I feel about for myself. And it's worth seeing. It's called 5 Wishes.
Diana, my name is Ruth, and I'm watching this, fortunately, after the fact. I was executor and did a successful farm transfer with me and my sister on farm ground. And I really wish I had seen this 6 years ago, but I did it. And I just say to everybody, start immediately. I started right away when I saw my dad was falling down and not running the business well. And it took me 6 years to really get things in order before he passed away. And I needed like every day of those 6 years that I worked hard. I quit all my other jobs that I was doing. This thing was a monster. And he didn't hire good attorneys and CPAs. And so, get a good team together, interview, get the references, call Iowa State University legal law people, get their list. It is so important because you lose a lot of money through lawyers that are not good, and they want to keep siblings fighting. That's
Well,
how they make money.
yeah.
So just
They
be
can
aware.
do that.
Be very careful with your team.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. You're right on. Well, I'm happy to have anyone contact me if you have some other questions or comments. I really genuinely want to see you get off and running on your farm transition, or rethink some aspects of what you've put in place if you have some issues that you'd like to talk about. Greg will share my contact information along with the information we have here. I thank you for making it possible for me to join you all today. I greatly admire you. And I wish
One
it all
other
the best.
question, have you done this presentation online this before?
I meet with farmers every week, every day. I do it all over the state of Washington, Oregon, and some places in Idaho right now. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Diana, for joining us. This is a luxury of the virtual world that we can bring in people from as far away as Washington State. So I wanted to remind people I shared a link to the evaluation in the comment box. Please click on that. We are doing a drawing for, I believe, a Practical Farmers water bottle if you enter for that. But most importantly, we want your feedback so we can continue to provide events like this and share the things that you want to learn and learn from each other as well. I also want to plug that on Friday from 5 to 6, we are having a Farmland Access Connections Meetup. And so this is a really great place, especially if you're looking to transfer to non-family members to build connections with beginning and aspiring farmers that are looking for land. Because again, land access is definitely a barrier, if not the top barrier for beginning farmers. As Diana had shared, I will share the handouts in an email with her contact information. So feel free to reach out if you have some specific questions as well. And my email is greg@practicalfarmers.org if you have any questions about any of our resources or looking for anything of that sort. But wanted to thank everyone for their time. We've run a little bit over, but there's some really great conversation and some really great questions. And this is a really complex process. And so, like Diana said, get started because it just continues to build. So thank you, everyone.